Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good day. Today, we're going to talk about how much money you should give a startup investor. It's probably one of the most common questions that I get because it can be really confusing. All you hear about is this concept of valuations, valuating a startup. You watch shows like Shark Tank, you see them talk about, I want $100,000 in exchange for 10% of my company. And if you can do that math quickly, that means that they just valued their business at $1 million. But how do they get to that number in the first place? And when is it appropriate to get to that number is the more important question. When you're early on in a startup, in a venture, valuing your business is almost impossible. That's because the things that are used to value a business are things that I would summarize as momentum or traction. It's things that you've accomplished along the way. And it's not small things. It's not the idea of the concept of just the idea has value. You're not adding value when you have a logo. You're not really adding value when you have a website and smaller things like that. To show traction and momentum with a business, with a startup, to attract investors, you really want to have more than just an idea in your head. Even if you don't have a lot of your own money to invest in gaining that traction, you should still be accomplishing as many things as you can without investors. And that's really important. The reason it's important is because what it does is it increases your valuation the more that you've done, the more accomplishments that you have. So let's talk about what some of the traction, some of those accomplishments really look like that do help value a startup or a business. Well, it's easy, or at least there are a few that are really easy. Revenue really matters a lot. The more revenue that you have, the more value that an investor will put on your business. If you're what's called pre-revenue, then you're really not in the market yet. You're not making sales. You're still at what I would say is the ideation or validation stage of your business. I'm going to have to move this mic because my printer decided it was going to update. Sorry about that. So revenue goes a long, long way. You could look at things that are non-revenue based to figure out the value of a business. In some instances, this can be the number of users. Infamously, Instagram was acquired by Facebook simply because it had, I don't remember how many, but a whole lot of users, and Facebook wanted access to that. There wasn't a whole lot of revenue at the time. Instagram was not doing hardly any, if at all, advertising and things like that. So there wasn't revenue for Facebook to value the business on, but they valued it based on the eyeballs, the number of users. So revenue is a good metric for valuing a business. The number of users is a good metric for valuing a business. Sometimes you see valuations done just based on proof of concepts. And what I mean by that is I'm actually a small angel investor in a business. They're still largely pre-revenue, but they've gotten a lot of momentum, a lot of traction. And the way they've done that is because they have done a lot of proof of concepts where they've signed strategic partnerships with very, very, you would know the names, large Visa and MasterCard. They've signed proof of concepts with those folks, and they are testing the product with Visa and MasterCard. And with proof of concepts, the strategic partner's not always paying you for that type of thing. But still, there's value in that. And the value in that is that a very large or a larger than the startup that you're running organization has shown interest in what you're doing. So all of these things increase the valuation of your business because they show positive momentum, positive traction, that you're able to run a business and accomplish some significant things. What do you do when those things don't exist? If you're a pre-revenue startup or an early revenue startup and there's just not a lot of things, a lot of traction to use, like the examples I gave you, how do you value a business in the first place? Well, that's when things like convertible notes and SAFE or simple agreements for future equity type of arrangements come in handy. That's actually one of my most popular videos. If you want to go check it out on the channel, it's SAFE, Simple Agreement for Future Equity. And it's popular because these types of funding mechanisms, convertible notes, simple agreements for future equity, these are very popular when it's very hard to value a startup or a business. So when you don't have a lot of traction, these type of mechanisms work really well. What they do is they kick the valuation down the road. An investor can still give you money today to help you pay for things that you need to accomplish, like marketing or building a prototype and all these things, but they push the valuation to a later date based on some agreement of how that's going to work at the time you do a valuation. So take a look at that. If you're confused about how to value a business, if it's very, very early and there's not a lot of traction, that's one of the mechanisms you can use, easy for me to say, is to push the valuation to a later date based on some agreements. Y Combinator is the startup incubator or startup accelerator that made safes very popular. They actually published a version of their safe template, so you can go Google that and find that for yourself and read how that works. Or, like I said, just check out my video. So those are other ways in which you can figure out how much equity to give an investor or how to value the business to later determine the equity you're going to give an investor. Another thing to talk about as it relates to giving equity to investors is being very, very careful with giving away equity. This is also true for giving away equity to your startup co-founders. By no means do I recommend that you hold on to your equity so tight that you're not bringing people in. I've coached a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders, and sometimes they're not willing to give anybody equity because they feel very protective of that equity. The problem with that is you should think of the equity that you have as a tool you can use to attract talent, whether that's co-founders or key employees, or attract investors. And if giving that equity away to that group of people helps accelerate the growth of your business, that's going to be valuable. Whereas holding on too tight to the equity of your business and then not getting anywhere because you're a solo operator is going to slow you down. That's important to think about. But conversely, it's important to not give away too much equity of your business. So recently I got a question from someone that said, I have an investor that's interested. I'm just not sure how much equity to give them. Again, rewind this whole video and look at the things I've talked about. There are some mechanisms you can use to stall that to a later date. But I will tell you, having been a startup investor, an analyst for one of the largest angel investing syndicates in the Southern United States, I do have a sense of about how much equity you usually have to give to very early stage investors. So the benchmark I would give you to try and give you something to think about is expect in your first rounds of outside funding, so that'd be seed capital, Series A, that type of thing, not capital from necessarily you and your co-founders, but your first round or rounds of early capital from investors. On average, what I have seen is that the founders will have to give up somewhere between 15 and 25% equity in the business. Again, that's a very generic answer. It depends on the industry. It depends on all the traction you have, contracts you have, all these other things. But if I had to give you a number just to have in mind when you're talking to investors, to have some semblance of shaping that, it's somewhere between 15 and 25% equity in your business. Now, that's when the investor or people aren't operating with inside your business. It's a whole different answer when we talk about how much to give co-founders and key employees. It would be much less for key employees. But just remember, somewhere around 15 to 20, 25% for very early stage investors in your business. It's not normal to see you give up half or even more of the business. That would be in instances where the investor is not only injecting capital into business, but maybe they are becoming a co-founder, running that business with you, those types of things. So somewhere between 15 and 25%. Remember, don't hold on too tight to your equity, but also don't let so much of it go that by the time you get to an exit, there's nothing left. Hope that helps. Have a great day.